So Graham was particularly involved in turning Samoa into a tax haven.
The island nation of Samoa is a tiny speck in the ocean halfway between New Zealand and Hawaii. Graham Briggs was one of the first to realise Samoa's potential over 2 decades ago. He spruiked himself as an expert consultant to the government on offshore finance. He set up an Asia City office in the nation's capital, just down the road from the regulator.
She was one of the first to bring that type of business here to Samoa, and I understand that he did have a say in advising on the original legislation. I've met him once. In fact, I met him during one of the reviews of Samoa in accordance with the Asia Pacific Group on Anti-Money Laundering. One of their reviews of Samoa back in 2014, that was when I first met Mr. Graham Briggs. He seems very personable. He's not very tall. Short, curly-haired, grey Aussie.
It may not look like a global finance hub, but there's tens of thousands of international companies based here, one for every 3 residents.
The genesis was, I think it was trying to find other sources of income that were legitimate and legal for a small island nation with very limited natural resources. That's basically the genesis of it.
It's a tax haven that's been criticised for its lack of transparency and has been blacklisted by the European Union since 2017.
In the good old days, when it was a bit more Wild West, so to speak, there was no regulation around. And so it was easier to incorporate a company, and as such, the risks for things going wrong and things being used for untoward purposes was probably higher in the early years of the industry.
It's a tax haven, which means it doesn't impose tax on a lot of income earned by people in that jurisdiction. And it was very popular for Australians because before we had a regime which taxed people on their foreign income if earned through a foreign entity. So if I put a foreign company in Samoa and that foreign company earned income outside Samoa, it wasn't taxed in Samoa and it wasn't taxed in Australia. Hence the benefit of having a tax haven in the middle.
For those who consider these sorts of arrangements, they're not clever or sexy or harmless. I think the victims when people don't pay tax is everyday Australians, the millions of taxpayers who do the right thing, who declare their income, pay their employees and have fair competition against other business.
The leaked documents show Asia City kept a confidential list of its highest risk clients, known as PEPs.
So a PEP is an acronym for politically exposed persons, and it's referring to people who held senior government positions. They may be politicians, they may be heads of state-owned enterprises or heads of government departments, and they may be foreign or domestic. The reason they are singled out and considered high risk is because people who are in those positions have, in the past, availed themselves of the opportunity to commit corruption offences.
The documents reveal hundreds of millions of dollars of Asia City's clients' money has been ploughed into the booming Sydney property market. 2 luxury apartments in this city tower were purchased by a Sri Lankan, Thirukumar Nadesan, whose wife is a member of the country's ruling Rajapaksa family. He's currently facing corruption allegations. The ownership of the apartments was hidden using a shell company registered in Samoa and managed by Asia City.
Australia is seen as an easy place to park your money if you're a criminal, if you're corrupt, if you want to launder money. More Australians out there, more battlers who are trying to buy their first home are going to be competing in an increasingly unaffordable market against potential billionaires or tycoons in foreign countries, some of them involved in corruption.
In another secretive offshore setup managed by Asia City, a Singaporean company called Bright Ruby Resources spent nearly $300 million on 2 office towers in Sydney's CBD and bought Sydney's iconic Hilton Hotel in 2015 for $442 million. Documents in the leak reveal the 6 layers of companies and trusts between Bright Ruby and its ultimate owner, Chinese steel billionaire Du Shuanghua, one of Asia City's highest risk clients.
He really became quite famous in 2008 when he became the 2nd richest man in China according to the Huron list, which is kind of similar to our AFR rich list. In fact, there was a bit of a story about, he fought off to become the richest man in China. He actually, I think, persuaded the editor to change that, because in China it's always not a great idea to become the richest billionaire, because a lot of things tend to happen to them after they top the rich list.
Controversy has dogged Du Shuanghua since he admitted to a closed court in China in 2010 that he'd bribed a Rio Tinto executive millions of dollars.
He admitted to paying one of a Rio Tinto employee about $9 million in US dollars as a bribe to secure some iron ore.
Were you surprised when he admitted to paying bribes but then wasn't prosecuted?
In a way, I think it kind of, you can almost see it as in one of his American legal dramas. He agreed to become key witness in a way that he probably was granted immunity from the prosecution in a particular case.
4 Rio Tinto employees, including Australian Atunu'U, were sentenced to years in prison over the scandal. Du went unpunished and went on to make billions. The leaked documents show Du Shuanghua's history of bribery was recorded in Asia City's files, along with his political connections to the Chinese Communist Party.
That makes him a politically exposed person by definition, by the anti-money laundering standards. I'm not surprised that someone like Mr. Du can buy the Hilton Hotel through a structure that perhaps hides the fact that he's behind it.
You have this Russian dolls sort of arrangement where opaque and offshore structures are used to conceal ownership, and it becomes very difficult for an Australian bank, for instance, to unwind that ownership structure when we don't have things like a beneficial ownership register to show who are the ultimate people sitting behind these corporate